My name is Ani Dasgupta. I'm the CEO of WRI. I just want to say a warm welcome to everyone who's here. A lot of you have come from far away, so thank you for making it here. This is a very exciting moment for us to launch of the Nature Climate Alliance. And I just want to point out from the offset, from the beginning, it's incredibly grateful that this thing is happening because of leadership of Norway and United States. You will meet leaders from there in a few minutes. Without that support, this wouldn't have happened. So thank you. Thank you for being here and actually being such a support of this. I also want to say that this launch, this physical launch, is a part of our launch because a lot of people in this alliance who are not here right now. And there is a digital component of this launch that is part of it. I want to thank, and you'll hear actually some people's voices on video as part of it. I really want to thank Jeff for allowing us to do this here. Carlos wanted to be here, but he's running the show, so you have other things to do. I also, I want to thank my Canadian colleagues for helping me do the next part, is to actually thank the unceded traditional territories whose land we are actually on, of the Musqueam, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, the Indian Band, the Squamish Nation, and the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. It is a great Canadian tradition, I think, to actually acknowledge whose land we are on. I just want to thank Jeff and Carlos especially for making this assembly really an assembly of thinkers and supporters of the environment movement, nature movement, and of biodiversity reversal. And I think he has really created this community much more so, and we are very grateful. And very grateful he's a member of the inaugural committee, and hopefully you'll bump into him, and please thank him for that. I just want to point, the reason we are here, we all know nature, protecting it, is connected to many things and how important it is, but nature crime, that's why we are here, which is criminal forms of logging, fishing, mining, wildlife trafficking, forest conversion is a key barrier to making progress of protecting nature. We have made a lot of progress actually acknowledging the importance of it. Some of you, I can see it in the room where there in Montreal, I was there, we make significant progress globally. But actually not dealing with nature crime and the corruption, which is really difficult. Actually head on, we will not make progress. That is why we are here, to actually come together and see if we can make progress on that topic across the world. We will not meet our nature targets. We will not meet our climate targets. We'll definitely not meet our SDG targets if we are not able to wholeheartedly actually do something about it. This is the reason this alliance is being formed. And it is not the first time people are trying to do something. Actually, a lot of you are working on nature crime. The question is, we're kind of winning small battles, not the war. The point of this alliance is actually bring all the different communities that need to work together, governments, civil society, businesses, NGO, most importantly, indigenous communities, have to come together and work. This is what we have learned, that it is not one piece that actually will solve it, that what we have learned, that we need to actually work together and create an alliance where we can actually push forward where there's political momentum, support operationally how to do it, create, every country is different, create nimble working groups to actually figure out what that particular country needs. This is the point of bringing together the alliance, and that's what we're doing. At WRI, I just want to say, I saw Christian here, I don't know if you're still here, we strongly believe that only way we can make progress is not when you're one organization, is to figure out how organizations, both government, outside government, private sector, can come together and solve these problems of difficult. We host, and that's why we are very proud to host the Secretariat. You'll meet the Director or Secretary in a minute of this alliance. And that's how we think we can make progress. We host the HAC Secretariat, the NDC Secretariat, because we believe we all need to work together, and there is a system to doing that. So thank you. We are very excited to be partnered. We come together as really a multi-party, not only multi-sector, but multi-country coming together in this. So I just want to say, today's plan is in a minute, you'll hear from our leaders who are leading this, but also you'll hear in a minute from our Yulia, who actually runs the Secretariat, about what we are trying to do in the Secretariat. And the important part after this, actually a panel discussion, which I have a privilege to moderate, is to hear from different perspectives. What does it mean to actually make progress in this? So with that, I really want to get started. I have absolute pleasure. I want to thank Norway and US again for being such a supporter. I have a pleasure to have introduced to you United States Acting Assistant Secretary for Oceans, International Environment, and Scientific Affairs. That's a very big title. Jennifer, our little John. Jennifer, please.
Well, thank you, CEO Dasgupta, for your warm welcome. It was deeply appreciated. We are all delighted to work with the Resources Institute as the Secretariat for the Alliance. I can say that for sure. I want to thank the GEF for hosting us. It's great to be here in Vancouver. This is my first time here. It's a beautiful place. I also would like to thank the Kingdom of Norway. Special Envoy Brodskar is here with us today. And I want to thank you for your leadership and your commitment in developing the alliance. Without your hard work, there would be no alliance. And of course, thank you to the other members of the inaugural steering committee and alliance participants. We are stronger when we are together. It is an honor to be here with all of you as we launch the Nature Crime Alliance. The United States is a proud member of this initiative at the beginning. Like some of you, probably even a little bit before the beginning. We have all been working hard to go as far as we could and to get to this point, and it is a big day. The launch of the Nature Crime Alliance is a call to action, and together we plan to act. To set the stage, nature is facing threats from all sides. Some of the most pernicious threats are nature crimes. Wildlife and timber trafficking, illegal mining, illegal land conversion, as well as crimes associated with fishing. We all know the damage they do. They threaten national security, undermine the rule of law, fuel corruption, and destroy ecosystems, driving species to the brink of extinction, all the while lining the pockets of transnational criminal syndicates that prey upon the world's most vulnerable populations. As diverse as these crimes are, nature crimes have similarities, which means addressing them as a group can increase the impact of our actions. Nature crimes of all types often rely on the same trafficking routes and networks to fund their operations, move products, and launder illicit proceeds. The hotspots for illegal sourcing, the transit routes, the centers of demand for illegal goods, and the organizations and networks involved often converge with other transnational crimes, including those involving drugs, weapons, and human trafficking. Those involved are often commodity agnostic. They will trade anything for profit, and their methods of operation are replicated across countries and types of criminal activity. We've seen instances of human trafficking, including forced labor and sex trafficking, committed alongside nature crimes. At the international level, there is growing evidence of human rights and labor abuses, including forced labor, coinciding with illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. And there is documentation that illegal mining camps are centers for sexual exploitation and forced labor. Then there are the weapons. Nature crimes are among the largest sources of funding for non-state armed group militias. There continue to be reports of rebel groups funding their insurgencies by poaching. For example, the Lord's Resistance Army in Eastern Africa made a practice of exchanging ivory for weapons and money. While we continue to pursue distinct efforts to address each type of nature crime, we must also work together to look at nature crimes in broader context and, when it makes sense, to consider them as a group. In the United States, we have an interagency initiative that does just that. And I'll give an example. The United States analyzes and maps points of nature crime convergence, identifying the shared perpetrators, networks, and supply chains. At the same time, we continue building the capacity of both the journalists and members of civil society who have helped uncover and document nature crimes at their source. Our International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs Bureau spends tens of millions of dollars annually to combat nature crimes around the world, including 50 million a year targeting wildlife trafficking. The U.S. Agency for International Development invests about $100 million a year to support national, regional, and global level responses to nature crimes. While most of these partnerships focus on one type of crime or another, wildlife trafficking, timber trafficking, etc., in 2021, USAID established comprehensive programs to improve the effectiveness of criminal justice and to mobilize community action against all nature crimes in the Amazon basin. And in OES, my bureau, we are augmenting our existing nature crimes funding with a new 2-year program that can support 120 initiatives for grassroots organizations in over 30 countries. This will give local communities the tools they need to identify and combat transnational organized criminal networks engaged in nature crimes in their communities. The launch of the Nature Crime Alliance marks a pivotal step in our efforts to safeguard people, places, and nature. And the United States is incredibly proud to be a founding government in this important initiative. In closing, I leave you with 2 thoughts. 1, the goals of the Nature Crime Alliance are more than just aspirational, they are must-do. The Alliance will be more than a talk shop. I know that President Dasgupta and all of you will make sure of that. 2, the Alliance is a declaration that we must work together to solve these problems. No one country, no one organization can tackle this alone. Collaboration is key. Working together, we must, and we will, make real progress in combating nature crimes around the world. I look forward to working with all of you in this important and shared mission. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assistant Secretary. It is wonderful to have such strong support, participation, and leadership from both the United States and Norway, and to launch this alliance together. So thank you so much. I am not sure what I can add to those excellent words, but I will attempt to explain a bit how the Alliance intends to address these very important issues. First, just to say on a personal note, as Vancouver is my hometown, I am delighted to launch here at the GEF in Vancouver. So to set the scene, give you a few examples. Illegal miners, for example, are plundering with impunity, untroubled by authorities as their toxic impact grows. But what if international media raises the profile of the crisis and heaps pressure on authorities, compelling them to act? In December 2022, Amazon Conservation worked with the Washington Post to raise the profile of illegal mining in Venezuela. Within days of the Washington Post article, authorities launched a major operation against the illegal miners. Illegal fishing. Fleets are plowing the ocean, stealing resources and revenues from some of the world's poorest countries. But what if there was stronger collaboration between coast guards and non-governmental organizations with access to monitoring technologies? Closer coordination between these multi-sector actors will enable rogue vessels to be located and intercepted. Illegal logging. Perpetrators are making fortunes, laundering their profits by exploiting fragmented financial systems. But what if financial intelligence units, banks, NGOs could share more information and make it harder for nature criminals to conceal their profiles? Too often still, nature crime is seen by criminals as an opportunity for huge profits. The possibilities of illegal timber, wildlife, and fish are seen as low risk and high reward. and often still viewed by the public as a victimless crime. It's just a few trees in the forest, it's just a few fish in the sea. And the numbers are staggering. Nature crime constitutes one of the largest illicit economies in the world, estimated at over $100 billion annually, with over $1 trillion in indirect impacts. And many of the organizations, government agencies even, and investigative journalists working as nature defenders are operating on a shoestring budget. Following hundreds of conversations between the interim secretariat and groups working to tackle nature crime, the Alliance has been set up by its participating organizations and governments as a multi-sector initiative to address these key challenges, and collectively to help move the needle on nature crime. We want to flip the current paradigm and make nature crime an extremely high-risk, low-reward activity for criminals. Following our three strategic pillars can summarize the goals and objectives of the Alliance. The Alliance will, number one, increase the visibility of the issue and raise political will, seeking high-level government support for the issues, as well as finding innovative ways to amplify the work of Alliance partners. Combining this with the latest research and data and evidence to underscore the need for action. Number two, mobilizing financial commitments. Those organizations that are operating on a shoestring budget could do so much more if there was more available funding for nature crime. The Alliance will work with institutional and philanthropic donors via a funder roundtable to coordinate funding on nature crime and increase available funding commitments, embedding nature crime more firmly in their grant making. The Global Environment Facility, Norway, and the US, and others are already leading the way on this. Number three, bolstering operational capacity. In many cases, we don't need new solutions. We need to better connect those with technology, funding, and operational know-how with those who can action it. And we need to better scale what is already working in some crime types and some geographies to new jurisdictions and crimes. The goal of the Alliance is not to duplicate initiatives and actions that are already working well, but rather to help connect the dots where they are not already being connected. Connecting the dots between investigative journalists and those with stories to increase the visibility of the issue and generate increased political will to tackle nature crime. Connecting the dots between financial institutions, risk and compliance departments, and those with information on nature crime typologies and the modus operandi of how these crimes work, such as investigative NGOs and frontline defenders. We've had conversations with government officials who would welcome support on monitoring their waters for vessels engaging in illegal fishing, which is converging with drug trafficking. They could access support from other nations who are active in this space, as well as monitoring tools developed by NGOs and private sector actors within the Alliance participant network. We've had conversations with journalists who uncover crimes and evidence in their reporting of a story, and they could easily partner with NGOs who are then able to take the information and evidence that they've uncovered and bring cases and advocacy campaigns with this information. So how is the Alliance planning to do all of this? We will start slowly, we will build close partnerships, and we will tackle specific topics one at a time. The Alliance Secretariat will support Alliance participants in convening targeted working groups to address specific gaps and opportunities in tackling nature crime. Time-bound, action-oriented working groups co-chaired by Alliance participating organizations and supported by the Secretariat, bringing together the right experts at the right time to move forward on specific issues. Some may take 3 meetings, and some working groups may need years, but all will work towards defined objectives. Working groups will fall under 6 strategic priority areas. Financial crime, bolstering methods to identify and disrupt financial flows linked to nature crime. Supply chain choke points, identifying where individual interventions can have maximum impact. Tools and technology, supporting the use of innovative technologies to fight nature crime. Law enforcement and legal frameworks, connecting key players and increasing coordination. Frontline defenders, strengthening financial and technical support for frontline defenders, including Indigenous people, local communities, and NGOs on the ground. Strategic communications, raising the profile of nature crime and solutions for fighting it. Additionally, Alliance participants will come together annually, either virtually or in person, to discuss progress on working groups, initiate new working groups, and create connections between all of the groups. Coordinated action is possible. Our future depends on it. I'm now honored to introduce the Secretary General of Interpol, Jürgen Stock, one of the founding participants of the Alliance as Interpol. He is sharing his thoughts with us today via video.
For 100 years, Interpol has been supporting police around the world to prevent and fight crime. And since 2010, our dedicated environmental security unit has been coordinating global efforts to combat crimes against our planet. All forms of environmental crime are organized and global in nature, affecting economies, communities, and societies. Such multi-sector challenges require a multi-sector solution. This is why we are pleased to be a launch partner of the Nature Crime Alliance. Through this alliance, we will continue to build on our partnerships to target the huge profits made from environmental crimes and help dismantle the criminal networks behind them for future generations and the sustainability of our planet.
What we want to do next is actually hear, I think, Assistant Secretary Jennifer, you did such a fantastic remark, and you said this alliance, the moment is to take action. That's why we are here. So we want to hear from a group of people who are actually doing things about it. And the point Assistant Secretary made is that the multiple facets of this that need to come together to work. This multifaceted nature, the complexity of it. So what we want to ask each of our panelists, some of them are already part of the alliance, others I hope will become part of the alliance. What we want to learn from them is what we're making progress and how we going to make more progress in this. So GEF, Senior Biodiversity Specialist, Hannah Fairbank. Hannah, let's start with you. You work a lot in Asia. GEF has been working and strengthening environmental rules. I'm actually apologize that I'm standing because there's no sixth chair here. So I want to, it's not by design. So GEF has been working on strengthening environmental rule of law for decades. So the question I have is, given the mandate and the positioning of the GEF, could you talk about how GEF goes about supporting countries and root out nature crime?
Thank you so much, and hello, everybody. I'm really honored to be here, and I'm very grateful to have this convening. This is really exciting. It feels like a bit of a culminating moment for the GEF and a culminating moment, obviously, for the launch of this exciting alliance. It's definitely all hands on deck in terms of addressing nature crime. I work mostly in the anti-wildlife crime and trafficking area. Within this, obviously, GEF has a much broader mandate. So I guess when we're looking at nature crime, I just want to give a bit of a caveat. I know there will be a conversation tomorrow in particular about the role of Indigenous peoples and local communities in this. What we are not talking about is strict enforcement action necessarily at the local level. People are being pushed into situations by poverty. There are food security issues, et cetera. When we're looking at environmental and nature crime, we really need to be scaling back. There was some mention of organized crime and like the broader criminal elements, and really targeting those parts of the system. So in talking to our CEO, who is an environmental lawyer by training, one of the things we were discussing is just this really needs to be seen in a broader kind of environmental rule of law lens. And so the GEF works across all nature areas, and so that environmental rule of law lens, I think, is important. So when we're looking at the current GEF strategy and future GEF investment, there's really been an evolution in the investment approach of GEF in terms of taking a much more integrated approach, looking at complex systems, and mainstreaming the issue of nature. And I think that fits really nicely with the approach that the Crime Alliance is taking. Policy coherence, we're working across and with all three branches of government, so not just the executive, but also the legislative and judicial, really critical when we're talking about addressing nature crime. And then incredibly inclusive. And so that, I think this gathering here at the GEF Assembly is demonstrating the evolution of GEF to be even more inclusive, youth, people from all walks of life. I do want to highlight the Global Wildlife Program, which is a really significant investment of the GEF, and I would guess that nearly all the institutions represented in this room have been part of that. So we've been investing since 2014 in addressing wildlife trafficking and crime. The next iteration of the program is much more comprehensive, looking at wildlife landscapes. Obviously, the wildlife crime issue is a big piece of this, and then also human-wildlife coexistence. So looking at human and wildlife conflict, which is an ever-increasing and important issue. $375 million over the last, since 2014, $2.5 billion in co-finance, and 38 countries. And so I was told to be very short. I will stop there. I do want to call out Hasita Bramar, who's in the back of the room. She's on the World Bank Global Wildlife team, leading the charge over there with the management team. Obviously, a lot of the details can come from her as well. So thanks, Sonny.
Hannah, you're right. We have to all make short comments. Can I just ask you one quick question, though? From you personally, as you work in all these countries, you work in many countries, can you share quick your thoughts about, the interaction of a donor, how important it is with the partner country, and what is your thinking and learning from that?
Sure. I mean, I think this alliance is a really great example of the convening power of a donor. And I've worked for several donors over my career. I started out actually in the U.S. government working for USAID and working on a lot of the regional anti-trafficking programs in Asia. So clearly convening. Keeping the issue on the table, highlighting the issue at the highest levels, building political will and international support. I was asked, have been, and continue to be in some conversations, isn't this a special interest issue, wildlife crime? And I'm really heartened by the broader recognition that wildlife crime is and nature crime is very linked to other transnational organized crimes, financial crimes, et cetera. So building that political will and keeping it up. Also, information sharing, technology, north-south engagement is something that donors can do and continue to do. And I guess the last bit is really supporting countries to work in cross borders, national borders, transboundary work, which can be very difficult to do if you're sitting in one government agency in one capital. So donors can really facilitate some of that. Thank you.
And your point, it goes directly to one of the pillars of bringing political will and making it very visible. Joe, I want to go next to you. Joe is the Executive Vice President of World Conservation Society, which has presence for years in multiple places in the world, difficult places in the world. Joe, I'm going to ask you a question more about your experience, your own experience working in the field on this topic, and what are we learning that actually can, push this alliance forward?
Sorry, thanks, Annie. And we should start with just those of us who are old enough to remember what it was like for many years just getting this issue even onto anyone's table. So let's just take a moment just to remember that when we were saying that nature is not just a niche and not just a privilege, an area, but actually for years we were shouting into a vacuum of trying to get this and realizing it's a mainstream issue. If any of you meet Carlos Manuel, get him to tell you the story of how he finally, with Papua New Guinea, when he was working for Costa Rica, got nature even to be part of the climate change discussion. You know, that first meeting was actually in Montreal when that first time happened. So for years, let's not forget how far we have come to a point where the consilience of nature and environment, biodiversity, is now very much at the heart of this. So this, to me, is and I just want to congratulate everyone who's put the work in to be able to get to this point, because it has been a fantastic initiative. This is the most coherent example of a framework of how to deliver on something which we've been shouting for years. So in terms of answering your question, any of the specific examples, you know, we work in 60 countries, mostly, as you said, in the lower governance countries, because that's where we're going to lose the most. And those are the countries that are doing the most but receiving the least for their efforts at the moment. They are contributing now, we finally realize, they're contributing the most to the pushing on climate change, on retaining biodiversity conservation. Those countries provide most in terms of services on a local and a global level for the world, and yet they're receiving the least. So when I work, and I've just come back from Republic of Congo, and Central Africa, the number one reason why people are displaced, the number one reason why people are in those countries are in extreme poverty is nature crimes. The single biggest one, whether it be illegal mining or logging or agricultural land grabbing, it's all the single biggest driver. So the one thing we've got to keep telling, working with governments, working with private industry and others, is that it is not just a peripheral issue. It is a single greatest driver undermining governance, communities, stabilities of livelihoods in most of the major regions of the world. The second one is that in those places, we for many years, and I take responsibility for this, we actually did things in the absence of any other forms of governance. We stepped into sectors that really weren't our expertise, because nobody else was doing it. So this is the big opportunity for NGOs to play the NGO role they should be playing, which is bringing together partners, working with governments, indigenous communities and local people and local communities, and private industry, to really cohere and move that forward, not to play the role of other groups that we now have. And this facility is particularly well designed to be able to finally say, let's bring in this group, let's bring in that group, let's recognize the sovereignty here, let's promote in IPs and LCs in that role. And I think that has a particular role. So to finish, I think there are fantastic examples, whether it be in the Amazon, the Congo Basin, and others, where this consilience of recognition is now transferring from recognition into implementation. And my last comment was, though, if we are to make the greatest impact on this, we must focus on the countries with least governance, lowest governance, that traditionally hold the greatest assets in this area, and where the greatest number of crimes are going to happen, and to build that capacity through our local partners in those areas. And that is a multi-generation, not a project-based initiative. But again, I just want to congratulate everyone who's been involved in this. This is the most profoundly clear, articulate, cross-sectoral approach to one of the world's primary great drivers of the three existential crises of biodiversity, climate change, and the continued threat of pandemics. And let's not remember, the next pandemic is going to come because of nature crimes.
That's right.
Okay? So this, again, I want to congratulate everyone on this, and it's going to be a very exciting few years.
Thank you so much, Joe. Thank you very much. I want to underline a point you just made, that one of the beauty of bringing people together is not only to work together, but also to specific organizations do their part. And NGOs, which I belong to, sometimes overreach and try to invent their own little governance structure, which is not what we need to do here, and actually work with the right governance structure. So I very much appreciate what you said. Hannah talked about the importance of indigenous communities and people in this work. All right, thank you for. We actually have a fantastic leader, Joan Carling, who's going to join us by video about talking about her perspective. I just want to say I was recently in Belém, not for the summit, just before that, actually bringing indigenous communities and leaders from 8 different countries, talking about their role in the deforestation battle and the importance of illegality point you talked about in that region. So firsthand, can we play the video, please?
Indigenous peoples have been intricately connected with the natural world for centuries, fostering harmonious relationship for our continuing survival. Our deep understanding of ecosystems and our sustainable practices have played a critical role in conserving nature and defining our culture and ways of life. However, the escalating threat of nature crimes poses a grave danger to these invaluable contributions and delicate balance of ecosystems. A strong alliance against nature crimes that respects Indigenous peoples' rights is necessary to safeguard our crucial role in conserving nature. Likewise, the persistent misconception and discriminatory attitude against Indigenous peoples as perpetrators of environmental crimes needs to change towards building partnerships with us as the true stewards of nature. The importance of this alliance for us is that it respects our rights, which will lead to enhancing conservation measures and strategies using our traditional knowledge and skills. It strengthens enforcement and monitoring to identify and report environmental crimes in real time as Indigenous peoples act as eyes and ears on the ground. It prevents conflicts and ensures sustainability through partnerships for nature protection in all its dimensions. The Alliance Against Nature Crime can catalyze united action from all of us to protect nature before it's too late. Together, we can pave the way for a harmonious relationship with nature to save the future of humanity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I must point out when the tech actually works, it's wonderful. So thank you for all of you who are managing that. This is a central point, and not only what you heard from John, the science of Indigenous community managing forest and land, science itself is extremely clear. It is better managed, it's cheaper. I want to underline this, it's cheaper to manage, it's better managed, and people are better off. And so this has to become central to our thinking and has already become. I want to go to UNEP next. We partner with UNEP in many different things. I want to ask just a simple, straight question from UNEP's perspective. Why is this a central topic, fighting nature crime?
Well, thank you. I think we've heard some really great examples and some strong cases for this. Assistant Secretary Littlejohn made the case very well about how essential nature is for sustainable development. But we also know there's no Paris Agreement without nature. So we don't achieve sustainable development. Countries are not able to access the full range of their development options without having strong ecosystems. Ecosystems provide those services that is food security. It's about stabilizing water. It's building resilience to the future adaptation changes from climate. And so these nature crimes rob countries of those options and of those economic potential. We're seeing in countries, for example, in Kenya, where tourism is based on the beautiful biodiversity of the country. You see it, of course, in fisheries and other examples that have been mentioned. So for having those development pathways, this approach is essential in terms of bringing all of the various stakeholders together. And that principle of coordinated action is consistent with the Global Biodiversity Framework vision of a whole of society approach, whole of government approach, everyone working together across different sectors. Amy Frankel from the Convention on Migratory Species is here. She can tell you that if you have a marine protected area with no enforcement, it's worse than not thinking that you haven't done anything at all. So these paper parks that don't also have enforcement and the whole of government approach to ensure that they are actually achieving the objective of what they're intended to do is essential. We're seeing that with ensuring deforestation-free supply chains. There needs to be information across the whole range of the transportation, across boundaries, across to different actors along the supply chain.
And the Global Biodiversity Framework envisions that in terms of, the investments in digital sequencing for genetic resources can be an opportunity to trace those supply chains, which is designed in the biodiversity framework as a way to share benefits, but it also receives this work together through the Alliance can also provide very important data and information to help advance those simultaneously. I think it's important also to note that looking across nature crime, this is about organized crime, but it's also about subsistence crimes. It's about harvesting for subsistence. It's about artisanal miners where you have maybe one person or providing an income option for their family. And so this important to look at this whole range of different contributions that can be addressed in different ways. With some of the more local communities, there's great opportunities to provide incentives. I remember when I was working in Mexico with fishermen who would rely on sea turtle harvest periodically as another access of finances for their families. They didn't really prefer to be going into that direction where they had to be looking behind their back all the time. Given the opportunity to make a living with fisheries, that would have been their preference. And so there is a range of different actors that need to be understood, and sometimes it's just supporting environmental defenders, just ensuring that there are some sustainable livelihood options available to local communities can be a very big part of the solution. So I think that economic incentives, sustainable livelihoods is a big part of it at the community grassroots level. When we spoke to Brazil recently, they're putting bioeconomy as one of their highest priorities in terms of saving the Amazon and ensuring that villages have the strength of these livelihood options to encourage the young people to stay. So I would just close by saying the coordinated action that is envisioned through this alliance to ensure that all of us working together, we know in UN agencies that's always essential as well, and we're always striving to do that better to ensure that biodiversity is mainstreamed across all of our various mandates. But raising this awareness for political will, that's an important component. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Susan, on this. I love that you highlighted opportunity and livelihood as a key component, and the bioeconomy. Actually, the conference I went to was actually on bioeconomy, and we've just published a paper. You can look at our website on Amazon's bioeconomy. As you heard from before, I just want to know how we're doing in time. We good? They don't know. That's good. Private sector and data will play a very important role, and from WRI, as you know, we believe very strongly data, if used properly, can play an incredible role. So it's a great pleasure, Sarah, that you're here, Sarah Matson from Microsoft. And Sarah, from your perspective, you're representing both data and private sector. You have a huge responsibility this morning. Tell us briefly how data can play a catalytic role here.
So for background, I work at Microsoft, and I can tell you for sure, as a data architect for the last 25 years, since my hair was brown, data is a big deal. How we're going to use data to fight these crimes, you think about Elliot Ness and follow the money. Well, money these days is data. And also all the little digital fingerprints that happen as something moves from a park to a port, to purchase. There's all these different places and gaps and industries that come together. And so I'm a solution architect by trade, which means I like solving problems. I founded a project at Microsoft called Project 15 because I'm a commercial solution architect usually, and 4 years ago I was on a global tour talking about how devices could communicate differently in emergencies for safe schools and workplaces. But I met Eric Dinerstein, and as much as I was talking about safe retail, safe factories, you name it, I was making it safe on stage. I never thought about safe parks. And when I was introduced to him, I didn't know his background, I didn't know who he is. I know everyone in here knows who he is. But I didn't. I just saw someone with a camera solution to fight poaching, and I went, oh, okay, so you're just making a solution you need to scale. And I started a journey that leads me to today. How is technology going to help you? And how are you going to be able to leverage it well? And how are you going to be able to work with folks like myself? We're process architects. So as we build this, what I'm calling the industry of conservation, really needs to sit next to retail, manufacturing, all these other industries we focus on. Because the amount of data you have and your data silo problem can only be fixed using hyperscaler type tools. I work at Microsoft, we have a lot of those type tools. But coming together and partnering so that you can also learn about how the partner ecosystem works within my world. Because, I wear this watch, but there's actually probably a dozen companies that came together to make this watch and the app that I can get data off of, and then they put a label on it, and maybe you think one company made it. But the reality is we all specialize in different pieces and parts. And so coming together to learn from each other to say, well, how does your world work? And then how does our world work? And together we can build these platforms and systems that are global, that are looking at data sovereignty, which is another problem to solve. And then coming together to build these global systems that can go faster and operationalize the good guys and the processes on the good guys' side, because the bad guys' side has been operationalizing and industrializing with technology as well.
So, Sarah, I hope you become a key partner of this alliance, because it's not just data, how we use it to take action is the key here, and that's something we have learned, and thank you for Microsoft's support and multiple things we do. I appreciate it. I just want to point out this, what we're discussing is about crime, and all the speakers you've heard from before, including me, are not experts in crime. But the next speaker actually is, and that's why this partnership is so important. I want to introduce Alan Cole, the UNODC Chief Border Management branch. And Alan, you've been working and supporting governments across multiple things, drugs, crimes, extensive. This is a key issue, and your thinking and support and excitement on this has been critical, I just want to point out. Love to hear your thoughts, how we can, from your vast experience, how we can make this alliance really do what it's promising to do.
Thanks very much indeed, and thanks for the introduction. Being described as an expert on crime is always a sort of mixed compliment. It's like coming from the Office on Drugs, which has got, dual connotations as well. Thank you very much indeed, and it's great to be here today. We really see the Nature Crime Alliance as a key enabler of what we're all going to do together in future. We've heard a lot of excellent interventions, and UNODC would like to add that there are two truths we hold to be true. The first one is that in this area, environmental protection won't work without governance, and governance doesn't work without enforcement. So the enforcement part of this package is extremely important. We're not so concerned with the individual with the chainsaw who cuts the tree down. We're much more interested in who is motivating and funding him and providing the logistics frameworks to do that. And the same with individuals involved in illegal fishing and mining and all the rest of it. We're much more interested in the networks behind it. And the second truth that we believe in is, we know to be true, is that these are organised crime groups that UNODC is already dealing with in many other contexts, and Jennifer made some excellent points on this in her opening remarks. So I looked out in amongst our own teams in the last few days to get some examples of this. So we pride ourselves in having experts in border management, in ports, in airports, in land crossings, in coast guards, in organised crime busting groups, and also environmental experts. And by talking to some of those, we can identify already that our experts, for example, working in Somalia, are able to say with great confidence that the groups that we used to tackle years ago in the context of Somali piracy then moved into the smuggling of migrants from Somalia and Ethiopia into Yemen and on into Europe, and are now heavily involved in the exotic pet trade, for example. And we know by speaking to our experts who work in the ports and airports in Brazil, looking at drugs transportation and the drugs trade, particularly by sea into the Balkans and then on into Europe, that they see those same groups strongly involved in illegal mining and in the forestry business. And if we go to Southeast Asia, we can speak to our colleagues who work on environmental crime down there. and maritime crime, and see the links between the groups that are involved in the fuel trade and the funding of Abu Sayyaf, the terrorist group, who are also involved in illegal logging and the fisheries business and so on. And there's those involved in the heroin flows from Afghanistan down into southern Africa are also involved in illegal fishing. So the connections are there to be seen. It is a complex business, but we have a lot of expertise in the United Nations, not just in UNODC, but elsewhere, and you've heard from Interpol, in how to disrupt these organised crime groups. We look at their logistics, and critically, our key partner in UNODC, perhaps our colleagues in money laundering. And that is a very good entry point, and we wouldn't be able to do that work in the future without the sort of data skills that Sarah's been speaking about. But these are the key points, I think, and this is where UNODC can add a whole lot of value. We're very grateful to Norway and the United States and the World Bank for all the support they give us. We wouldn't be possible, as others have said. And finally, I want to finalise with a bit of good news, I think, which is that we now have an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding with WRI. That is going to allow us to support the work of the Nature Crime Alliance, and to provide our resources and to ensure that the Nature Crime Alliance has access to the data that we have, the experts that we have. And we're based in, I think, 85 countries now. So please be assured, WRI and all our colleagues in the NCO, that all our points of contact in those governments, in ministries of justice, in courtrooms, in the prison service, in wildlife services, they're all at your disposal, as indeed are we. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alan. Thank you. I just want to underline the MOU that we're developing in partnership. It's critical. The vast resources you have and connections, and to make this successful. So very much looking forward to that. And thank you very much for your leadership and support. So I hope this is just a snapshot, a glimpse of depth of knowledge that exists that we need to bring together. This is why the Alliance exists. We could have had 20 more people in this panel to get all the different dimensions. So I really want to thank you for being here and sharing your thoughts on the panel. Please, a big hand for the panel. Thank you very much.
Recognizing that our partnership is global and recognizing that the room that we were allocated, as wonderful as it is small. And we also didn't want to encourage people to travel, so far to Vancouver for a 90-minute session. So we did focus on those of you who are here anyways. But in parallel, the team has worked really hard to have a digital launch moment. And as part of that, this is just an excerpt of some of the digital elements of the launch that will be released later today with some different perspectives.
If you factor in the indirect environmental costs, the World Bank estimates that the total annual cost of illegal trade in logging, fishing, and wildlife amounts to a staggering $1 to $2 trillion per year.
The financial crime compliance function at Santander recognizes that behind every environmental crime, there is a financial crime. Not only because of the significant revenue that organized crime draws from environmental crime, but because certain types of environmental crime, like illegal deforestation, have a significant impact on the climate.
Crimes against nature are increasingly driven by sophisticated international networks that are transnational. Confronting them effectively requires collaboration between governments, as well as the support and active participation of the business and social sectors.
The Wildlife Justice Commission's motto is that it takes a network to defeat a network. We need to bring actors from all sectors to effectively address nature crimes and their convergence with other forms of serious organized crime.
The world must come together now to stop this environmental destruction. And this is why the new Nature Crime Alliance is such an important and powerful partnership. Traffic is very proud to be a founding member. Working together, we can catalyze the knowledge, resources, and actions to accelerate global efforts to combat nature crime.
The Nature Crime Alliance could not have come soon enough for the Environmental Investigation Agency. We've been investigating environmental crime for over 30 years. We think that the hope for a sustainable future really depends on the effective implementation, the enforcement, the deterrence that encourage us to treat the planet with respect.
Our hope and belief that the Nature Crime Alliance is exactly that, an alliance that brings together private sector and public sector actors with the common aim of disrupting the criminal networks that profit from the destruction of nature.
I'm happy to announce that the Wildlife Justice Commission is joining the Nature Crime Alliance as a founding member.
As transparency is a great antidote against crime, we look forward to contributing to the Alliance's success.
We're very excited to join this group to help root out the drivers of this crime and to give us a chance at a sustainable and equitable future.
That was a great video. It's a great pleasure to bring our last speaker for closing remarks, Hans Brotzker, who is the Special Envoy, Norway Special Envoy on Climate. Hans is a consummate diplomat, as is Jennifer, has worked all over the world, but he has created many institutions that we take for granted, like NICVI, over the years, so we couldn't have a better partner, better leader here. Hans, please.
Thank you so much, Arnie, and I would like just to begin by thanking you and thanking Acting Assistant Secretary Littlejohn and their good colleagues for working hard for quite a long time now to get us to where we are today. I mean, without you, this would not have been possible, and it's the first step in a long road, I know, but it's a very important one that we have done together. And I also like to thank Jeff, not just for hosting us, but participating actively in getting us to where we are today. UNODC as well, all the members and supporters of the Alliance from civil society, private sector, academia, international organizations, indigenous peoples groups, and many, many others. Thank you so much for helping us to get us where we are today. And as we heard from the excellent panel, these are difficult and complex subjects that we are dealing with. And luckily, I think when you start working on something like this, you don't quite know how complicated and complex it will be. Because when we started talking about this several years ago, I think back in 2019, just before the outbreak of the corona pandemic, we thought it would be challenging, but a fairly swift process. And we were very wrong about that, but it's been a very thorough process, and I think that's very important for me to underline that. We've had the hundreds, we, and that's the larger we, have had hundreds of consultations with indigenous peoples, organizations, civil society, journalists, lawyers, donors, philanthropists, private sector, academia, law enforcement, and multilateral organizations. So it's been a very thorough process, as I said. And last but not least, we had numerous consultations with governments from Asia and the Pacific, from Africa, America, the Americas, and Europe. Many have been consulted, and many have voiced a strong commitment and a solid emphasis on the importance of this pressing issue. And all have stressed the same concern, that nature crime and organized criminal networks behind these atrocities is a major problem across the globe. And I believe it was the correct decision to take our time to do these thorough consultations in advance of the launch here today. To succeed in this, we need to listen, to continue to listen to each other. And the Nature Crime Alliance must respond to the needs of the members of the Alliance. Only then can it be a powerful force against the perpetrators of nature crime. And as we have heard from the panelists and others, all the speakers today, much has been done, but we have a need to continue this road. But it's important, and we heard from Acting Assistant Secretary Littlejohn about what the United States has been doing for many years. We heard from the World Resources Institute, UNODC, Indigenous Peoples' Rights Initiative, Wildlife Conservation Society, GEF, and others. Let me just say that also over the last decade and a half, since we founded the Norwegian International Climate and Forest Initiative in 2008, and this is Norway's largest climate program, we have supported numerous initiatives aiming to reduce illegal logging and associated trade. What we have learned from these initiatives and partnership with governments is the power of effective law enforcement, innovative technology such as traceable systems, and the use of satellite images to not just monitor the forest, but detect real-time changes in forests. And the role of civil society, including indigenous communities, in speaking out about the needs and violations of the custodians of nature. We bring with us these experiences into the work of the new alliance. Today, we have marked the launch of the alliance. This represents both the last page of the first chapter of the Nature Crime Alliance, which, as I said, consisted of months, or if not years, of consultations and preparations to ensure that the setup of the alliance answers the concerns and needs of those who both suffer from nature crime and possesses the tools to fight it. The launch also represents the first stage in a new chapter of the alliance. I believe this chapter will be an exciting one, and this is when the work really begins. As co-chair of the steering committee, I'm proud to read out the Vancouver Statement on nature crime, which the steering committee has agreed upon. And my co-chair is Christine Dawson from the State Department, so I read on behalf of you as well, Christine. Today, we are joining together to form the Nature Crime Alliance, a new multi-sector approach to fighting criminal forms of logging, mining, wildlife trade, land conversion, crimes associated with fishing, and the illegal activities with which they converge. Nature crime constitutes one of the largest illicit economies in the world, inflicting devastation and destruction upon people and planet. We recognize that these crimes cannot be eradicated without multi-sector cooperation, that there is a pressing need for greater coordination and collaboration among the diverse actors fighting nature crime. And a new approach is needed. We have formed the alliance in recognition of this need, with members including representatives from governments, law enforcement, international organizations, civil society organizations, frontline defenders, including indigenous peoples and local communities, donors, and the private sector. We will work together through the alliance to raise political will, mobilize financial commitment, and strengthen operational capacity to fight nature crime. Through a range of initiatives, from solutions, focus working groups convening representatives across different sectors, to structured communication channels that enable open dialogue and the sharing of best practice. The Alliance is building a new international collaborative response to nature crime. This is the first time that such a multi-sector approach to this global challenge has been developed on this scale, with the Alliance marking a key moment in the fight against nature crime. We encourage governments and organizations that share our determination to end environmental injustice and protect people and planet to join us in the Nature Crime Alliance. Thank you for your attention.